Hey guys, this is Hunter Levine, and thank you for taking some time to check out the Captains Collective podcast, where I sit down and interview fishing captains, anglers, artists, and other industry leaders looking for insights, stories, and understanding to their outdoor experiences. This podcast is brought to you by Skinny Water Culture, Costa Sunglasses, Florida Fishing Products, Turtle Box Audio, and Orvis Fly Fishing. In today's episode, I sit down for another interview with banker turned shop owner turned guide turned travel host turned TV host and much, much more, Flip Pallot. Flip is known for being one of the most influential figures in saltwater fishing and an all-around outdoorsman. In this Round 2 podcast, we dive deeper into Flip's perspective on his career looking back and the role that chance played. He also shares with us the importance of challenge and how he has a hope for the future that we would see a change around those who love the woods and waters. If you enjoy this podcast, please help us out by sharing and subscribing. To learn more about the show and to sign up for our newsletter and hear more about our upcoming hosted trips, head to captainscollective.com. We hope you enjoy. Thanks for listening. This is the Captains Collective. All right. Well, hey, Flip, thanks for allowing me to come over and record a Round 2 podcast and enjoy this beautiful day together. It ended up being a really nice day during turkey season for you to be around here.
Only if you like perfect, yeah. I'm glad we could do it here outside.
Yeah, it ended up working out schedule-wise, and I've been really excited to sit back down with you and get to pick your brain. I remember the first time I recorded, it was one of those things where I had a lot of follow-up questions and wanted to dive a little bit deeper, and I'm grateful for this opportunity for the conversation to continue.
Let's dive deeper.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, one of the things that's challenging about interviewing you is you've done a lot of interviews over the years. And so there's something that makes that easy because I can learn things about you. And then there's things that can be challenging because it's hard to find questions that maybe haven't been asked. But as I was preparing for this and wanting to find just maybe some areas of your life or the work that you've done that people haven't pressed as far into, one of the things that just kept standing out to me was, as much of an outdoorsman as you are, you're very philosophical. And it's not just about what you're doing as you're sharing stories over the years, but about why people should consider doing that, or maybe how they should see those types of things. Have you considered yourself a philosopher?
No, not really. I think that if you, through the magic of television, which is so darn powerful, if you're at all in the public eye, I think people attribute things to you that really may not be there. So basically, I think I'm just someone that loves to hunt and fish and has found a way to get through life doing that. I tried other things, but my heart was never there. Like all of us, we want to be hunting and fishing or something like that, hiking, adventuring, cruising, something like that. The trick is to find a way to do it, or be lucky enough to be thrust into a way to do it, which is kind of what happened with me. It was very often in life, it's more a function of being at the right place in the right time and story of my life.
That's an interesting thing when you hear people's story, or even just certain elements of my own story, where you're looking back and there's fortune and luck, and you're looking back and there's the willingness to take certain leaps. There's a willingness to sacrifice certain things. When you look back at your story, how much do you attribute to luck and how much do you attribute to good decisions or work ethic, or how do you parse through that in your own story?
Never really thought that much about it, but in response to the question, I would have to say that luck is just, I had parents who let me do things that other parents didn't let their children do. We lived on the edge of the Everglades, and my parents just sort of let me roam there. I'm not really sure what their philosophy was about that, but I mean, I never had curfews or bedtimes or be home by whatever. That just never was part of our upbringing. And my dad was never my buddy. He came back from World War II. He was focused on providing, being a father, not so much a dad or a buddy. He was busy providing a home and an environment, and he was very highly principled and strict. But he was never my buddy. We never hunted or fished together, or did things like that together. We did things together as a family and that sort of thing, but it was not the relationship that I saw in other fathers and sons. And so I had to go elsewhere to get that person in my life. And seems like it was always an older person for me. And I was lucky in that the people that I chose or that chose me, I don't know, were always kind and willing to share. And so my learning curve in the outdoors was shorter than most. And of course, it was at a time where the resource was strong and there was lots of habitat and it was near at hand. Florida had a fraction of the population that it has today. And so things were available. Landowners were of the mindset that they were willing to let you trespass. And so I grew up in a time in Florida where you could do things that you just not only can't do now, but can't imagine now. And you mentioned leaps. I identify with that because my dad was an attorney and had some prominence in the local community. And I'm sure that in certain circles it was kind of expected that I would follow along that path, which I tried for a while. And I was uncomfortable every single day in that setting. I'd look out the window and just imagine myself out there somewhere. And I know that lots of people listening to this, hopefully lots of people are listening, but I'm sure they had the same feelings. And so it ultimately comes to whether or not you're able to see the leap and then whether you're able to take the leap. And, I wish I could say that I was bolder about it, but it took me a long time to leap. And it's different if there's a net. If the leap is such that there is no net, very often it takes longer to leave the ground. And that was my case. I mean, I settled into a sort of a banking career that kept me, behind a desk and dealing with people that were in the process of accomplishing things that they wanted to accomplish, and they were on the other side of my desk because I could help them in some way, usually involved money, and but I was still there. I was still behind the desk. They were gone after a short conversation, and pursuing their dream, and I was still trying to figure out what my dream was. Well, I think I knew, but I don't think I was ready for the leap, as you put it, which is a great way to put it. And but finally, the springboard became evident, and I was able to get up the courage to do it, and I left the banking world and started a pretty cool little retail store, hunting, fishing, outdoor art, guns and tackle, antiques. And it was a beautiful, wonderful store, and lots of interesting people came there. And it was in a major regional shopping mall, very high-end mall. And I was obliged to keep mall hours, which were until 9 o'clock every evening. And the busiest retail times of the year were the times that I wanted to be outdoors.
Yeah.
Those very same times. I mean, it was the deer season, and it was the duck season, and it was the quail season, and the turkey season. And those were the times that I had to be in the shop. And during the summers, when it was really great bone fishing and tarpon fishing, that was the time of the year where I had to travel to buy goods for the store. And so it was just another form of prison, you know, slightly more gilded than the bank. But it was still a prison, and I was still inside. And I thought for some crazy reason that because it involved all the things that I loved, guns and rods and reels and art, and that it would make it easier to stay inside and pursue a retail path, but it wasn't. So it lasted a couple of years, and then there was time for another leap. And I really didn't know what that leap was going to be, but at some point, the idea slipped into my mind that guiding would be a way to go, to just guide fisher folk and hunters. I knew the areas. I knew the fish. I knew the animals. I knew the country. I knew the whole deal. I had skiffs and airboats, and I had all the tools. It just lacked the leap.
Yeah.
So at some point, I did that. I went ahead and got a captain's license and began to guide, left the retail business and began to guide. And as I look back, I see that as the starting point of my life, really. Everything else was preparing me for the mindset of not having a net, no 401k, no paid vacation, no health care, no benefits of any kind, just faith in my ability to produce and be successful enough. And I was, again, luck plays a big factor. I was lucky, very lucky. Other guides had to pay a lot more dues than I did. I knew people like Mark Sosin and Lefty and Dave Whitlock and just all kinds of people who immediately sent me clients when I began to guide. So I didn't have to build that client base that other people had to build. And the people that they referred were in some way vetted because they came from people like Lefty and so I had that leg up. Not exactly a net, but it was, I didn't have to wonder where food was coming from right from the very first day. gosh, I mean, I had a guy who approached me when word got out that I was going to start guiding. And he came around the shop and he said, he goes, I'd like to hire you in June. And I said, okay. I said, I don't have my license yet, but I will by then. And what days? I had a calendar and it was empty. And I said, what days would you like to book? This was the very first customer that I had, client. And he said, June. And I said, yeah, but the days. And he said, June.
That's a good client off the bat.
Yeah, that was my first client. June, and June turned into July, and he preferred to fish in his skiff. He had a really nice skiff that I had built for him, and he had an apartment or a condo in the Keys, and so we just took his boat and stayed at his condo for June and then July of that very, very first year that I began guiding. So I had 2 paid months, and I figured, well, there'll be some rain days and some days that I don't get paid. This guy wanted to fish every single day. It didn't matter if it was lightning showers. He didn't care.
Yeah.
So we fished every single day for June and July, and I was a wealthy man by
the end of it.
By the standards of the day. So my career, gosh, it almost launched itself, you know.
I've been really fascinated by it because I've been able to sit down with a lot of people who have been able to build these wonderful lives in the outdoors. And there is this sense, you know, I say luck, but I'm a person of faith, so I think there's purpose and blessing behind it. But there's this sense, too, where I like the illustration of life being a card game. And so there's certain, you didn't pick your cards. I mean, you didn't pick when you were born. You didn't pick who your parents were and that you were born in South Florida. And you can acknowledge those things, but there were still, you know, seeing an opportunity, knowing how to play the hand, knowing what things to put down. And as I've interacted with different people, I've always been very fascinated with how they played the hand they were dealt. And I think sometimes when people over-attribute luck and say, oh, well, you know, Flip got lucky, it's not really that they're robbing you of some of the decisions, sacrifices, choices, opportunities that you saw or decisions you made. It's actually that they're robbing themselves of getting to learn a little bit about how that might affect them. And it's interesting because I told you this the last time we sat down, but your television show, Walker's Cay, in particular, is probably the show that I've heard the most people say, I was holding the deck of cards with my life, and I was influenced by this show, and I decided to play my hand a little different. I didn't have to sit in the office, or I didn't have to, you know, take that path that everybody expected. And so there is an interesting balance between the hand that you're dealt and how you play it. And as you look back at it, you know, it seems like you really wanted to be outside, but at the same time, it seems like you were able to, you had those connections, but you knew what to do with them to some extent. You know, you knew how to see an opportunity and take it.
Yeah, I suppose there's that, or some of that. But Hunter, one of the huge ingredients in whatever my recipe has been is the timing of it all. Again, re-mentioning everything that existed in Florida, in the wild Florida of those years. On top of that was a moment in time where all of a sudden, and it was sudden, almost like the development of technology these days, all of a sudden there were reliable outboard motors. I mean, we went from things that might bring you home to things that absolutely brought you home. The same could be said for skiffs. Suddenly there were skiffs that had features that they had never had before. There were actually rod racks for storing rods. I mean, there were trim tabs that made the boat ride according to what conditions were.
Yeah.
Along with the reliable outboards, and I mean steering that went from metal cables to hydraulic steering. There were tremendous, all of a sudden, advances in tackle, drags that worked, monofilament that actually had reliable braking strengths, plastic lures. It's hard to imagine a little thing like the change from wooden lures to plastic lures, what a huge thing that was. Lipped plugs, diving plugs that would let you fish depths that you effectively that you couldn't fish before in that way with plugs. I mean, it was just everything. Rods, when I was growing up, were either made out of metal. Fishing rods were made out of metal or bamboo cane. Neither one was very effective. And then all of a sudden there was fiberglass, lightweight, hollow. Had modulus that cane and metal never dreamed of. And so all of these things came crashing together all at the same time. And because we were using tackle that was designed basically for fresh water, and we were beginning to fish huge saltwater species with these freshwater items of tackle, we had to develop and design and innovate at a rate that had never been done before, because everything was new and nobody had done these things before. And so it was the perfect storm. It was an era in the country and in the lifestyle that can never be duplicated again. No one will ever be able to pioneer the things that I was able to pioneer, not because I was brilliant or able to take the leap or brave enough. It was just the time. So call it luck, call it timing, call it whatever. I was just fortunate to be there, surrounded by people who felt the same way that I did. One of the things that came crashing into existence at that very same time were local fishing clubs in South Florida. And those clubs threw people together who had exactly the same interests and faced exactly the same challenges that I faced. This equipment let us go to places and do things that had never been done before. And so the people who were most driven sort of rose to the top of that whole fishing club game. There was another dynamic that was put in place. It was called the Metropolitan Miami Fishing Tournament. And everyone in South Florida, and indeed around the country, participated in that tournament. And the tournament was structured in such a way that I think there were something like 60 species that were recognized in the tournament, and then there were tackle divisions within which you could fish for these 60 species of fish and make entries into the tournament. And so there was a spin casting division, which was 8-pound test or less spinning. And people were fishing for amberjack, sailfish, marlin with 8-pound spin and artificial lures. And then there was a plug casting division, which was 12-pound test or less. And we were fishing for those same fish. I mean, wahoo, kingfish, grouper, snapper, I mean, everything. Then there was a light general division, which was 20-pound test or less. And you could use live bait or any kind of lure. And then there was a heavy general, which was just sort of unlimited. You'd do whatever you want. It was just the biggest fish you could catch. But, I mean, huge sharks and jewfish that were 300 or 400 pounds. And people were catching them on plug rods and spin rods and coming up with ways to make new drags with new drag materials that had never been used before. We had high school metal shop teachers that were making replacement parts for reels and reel seats and things like that. I mean, the thing was just, it was just exploding, and I was there. I mean, if I'd have been 10, 15 years later or earlier, I wouldn't have been there. But I was right there. I mean, right in the heart, in the middle of it, participating, getting lost for days in the Everglades. And somehow my parents must have been sainted because they somehow figured, well, he's still in Florida. We know that.
That was the standard at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, so I don't know. I look back and I just kind of all I can see is timing. And I'm tremendously thankful for having been there then. And you know, another really wonderful part of it was, you know, I guess it was sort of like the early days of America when people emerged like Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett and people like Jim Bowie and people like that who became heroes of the time. I got to come along at the same time that heroes of that era were identified and were building their own legends. And so I got to grow up with all those people and know all those people, all of them. Well, not every single one of them, but a lot of them. I mean, I knew, grew up with, fished with, hunted with, got to exchange ideas and I got glimpses of their ethos, and it had a chance to form whatever I was doing and whoever I was becoming. And so I don't know.
Did you, when you look back at that, it's interesting because, you know, where I sit, I'm 31. And so I talk to a lot of people about what that era of time, what some of the things that were produced from writing to television to films to things like that did for them. And, you know, people were creating clubs, they were creating media to inspire people and to share places. And I hear on my side of that timeline the effects that came from it. But I'm curious for you, when you were doing things in that season of life, did you feel a sense of purpose? Was there a purpose that you kind of carried, or was it less intentional than that?
Well, at that point, I would say less intentional. I wasn't thinking in those terms. I was strictly and selfishly, perhaps, just enjoying what was dear to me at the time, and perhaps neglecting other things that I might have been paying more attention to, like school and work and things like that. I think the purpose kind of came along a little bit later. I think, more when I got involved in television, and came to the realization of how incredibly powerful television was at that time, and it was insane. There was no internet. There were no forums like we're involved in right this minute. Those things, blogs and podcasts, and them did not exist. And so television, and I think people in general, and especially young people, trusted television much more than they do today. It was the chosen media for the world at that time. And so I think that also at that time, when I was first getting into television, there wasn't a tremendous, there were not a lot of outdoor shows. There certainly weren't many good outdoor shows. There were 3 or 4, period. That was it. So the competition for sponsorship was not anything like what it is today and what it has become. So the net result of that was that whoever was creating the content, producing the shows, had tremendous creative control over what was produced. The sponsors didn't have the power to dictate how much airtime their products got, so creatively there was tremendous control. And I think, getting back to the term purpose, I think when I started realizing those things, and when I started comparing what was out there and what was available and what I thought was important, I realized that we had the power to do that. I say we, I mean the team that I worked with, because I had absolutely no knowledge of how to produce anything. I knew how to catch fish. That's all I knew how to do. I knew how to find turkeys and deer and hogs, and that's all I knew. But I fell in with some guys who really did understand the other side of the television coin, and the actual production, the filming, and the sound, and production values, and things like this that were all totally foreign to me. I would go to the movies, buy a ticket, and watch the movie, and like it or not like it, but how it got there and what it took, no idea. So these guys that I fell in with were incredibly talented, and totally willing to share and teach me things, and I was a sponge. I mean, I was anxious to learn it, and I think my contribution to the process had to do with the fact that, well, the most outstanding show of the time was the ABC American Sportsman, and it was an American Broadcasting Corporation show that reached the world. The format was a celebrity format. Someone who knew how to hunt or someone who knew how to fish would host a movie star or a sports figure or someone prominent worldwide. And the formula worked and was engaging to millions of people because they got to see their favorite soap opera star hunt a jaguar in Africa or wherever. It was interesting to me, but it wasn't entertaining to me. To me, it was painful to watch someone, a celebrity of some kind, who really had no connection to what they were doing. They were doing it just the same way that they would do a TV show or a movie. They were acting. What they were doing didn't call to them in any way, for the most part. There certainly were exceptions, but it came off that way to someone who was really in that life and really in that. So when it came time to, I had the opportunity to do something on my own in that field, I wanted it to be real. I wanted it to feature people who were connected to one another by more than just a production. Connected either by a personal relationship or connected by a true love for what they were really doing. And that's what I wanted to feature. Real relationships. I realized very, very clearly that we all have people that we enjoy hunting and fishing with, people that we have a connection to on another level. It's not a social level necessarily. It's not a spiritual or religious connection, political connection. It's much more visceral than that, and involves a totally different alchemy than those relationships require. And those relationships can only flourish within the confines of a skiff or around a campfire at a hunt camp, or that's where those relationships are nourished. And that's what I wanted to feature. And the people that I worked with on the production side were cool people. They understood that. I mean, they really understood, and were outdoorsmen themselves to varying degrees. And so, and then we had all this power as a production company to make the product look like we wanted it to look, and not just feature pulling on fish faces, but dwelling on the relationship, dwelling on the place where this was taking place, the culture, the food, the wildlife, everything. So, and sometimes the politics were of interest. We filmed in a lot of Latin American countries where the governments were in turmoil. And so all of that led us to a product or a series which at the time was unique, and we had the power to keep it that way creatively. Today, there is so much competition for a manufacturer that makes a rod or a reel or a truck or fishing line or whatever, that they have all the power. Because they can choose between 1,000 different production companies until they get what they want. So what happens is the whole tone of outdoor programming on television anyway has this infomercialistic, is that a word?
It is now.
It has that feeling.
It feels like a sales pitch.
It does. And it also, and the production feels to me hurried, because the guys that are producing it, they don't want to show some sponsor's product. They want to show what's important to them: fishing, hunting, shooting, whatever it is. That's what they want to communicate, but they're obliged to dilute that with infomercials, basically. And so they have to hurry. And the viewer feels that. I feel it. I can't, I turn it off. I can't watch that. And people say to me sometimes, why don't you resurrect Walker's Cay, or why don't you do a new this, or why don't you do that? I would love to, but I don't like the rules anymore. And I don't want to be associated with those sorts of productions. And I've already done it another way, and it was fun, and I think it was true. The internet, however, is beginning to provide other platforms where I think you have more creative control. At least at this point in time, I think the better entertainment is available online, as opposed to on television in terms of everything. I mean, I used to enjoy watching some of the news channels. I was watching one the other night with Diane, and there was an item of news that was being discussed by the people on the channel. And then there were 17 commercials for 17 different products or services before the next portion of the news program came back on. 17. I mean, it's just...
I'm curious so I feel like, and I don't think this is new to my generation, but I agree that it feels like a lot of people are trying to sell products because that's what they have to do. It feels like an info commercial. You know, if you want to experience, you need this rod, this lure, this thing. But I also feel like there's a lot of people who want to sell themselves, and so it almost becomes this kind of, there's a lot of bravado in this idea that, look how great I am, look how many fish I catch, and the same thing gets overlooked as far as the experience and place. And do you feel the same?
Well, I think you see that more online than you do on television or anywhere else. I think, and I think the reason for that is that there are so many plans and schemes online where you can create income or generate income from the amount of people who are engaged by whatever the platform is that you're using, and whether it be likes or subscriptions but it's numbers. So these people try to build themselves up into something not necessarily that they are, but that will generate whatever it is that they need to generate dollars in the end. And so, yes, I see people shamelessly promoting themselves, and I shouldn't say shamelessly. I guess it's just the way it is now. It's not shameless. It's just the way it is now. That's the way it is, and I'm way closer to the end than the beginning, and so at this late point, I choose not to do that.
It's interesting to me, though, from my vantage point, because a lot of people enjoy the era that a lot of the kind of notable things that you did were thriving with those TV shows. And there was, if you're watching it and you see there's a poetry to it, the writing's really thoughtful, there's a poetic nature to it, there's painting and art, which still has plenty of appreciation in the outdoor community. But it was there was not just the genuineness about it, but didn't seem to be such a concern for coming off like a tough guy, or coming off like I think there's this kind of posturing that happens in the outdoor world, or just in the world in general, where what happens is there's a lack of authenticity, and I don't want to write and do it this way because I might seem too artsy, I might seem soft, I might seem What if I don't seem like a great angler or great outdoorsman? And so it's very interesting to me that there's a draw. I feel a draw with my generation of we want to move back towards that, but yet I also see the current pushing the other way, and it's kind of an interesting tension, I feel. I'm not sure if you see that, but
I guess I don't see it because I'm not there. I'm thrilled to hear that you feel that within your generation there is this desire to return to, just call it being true, and featuring your guests more than yourself and that sort of thing. I'm pleased to hear that you sense that there is some resurgence of that thought process, because certainly the opposite has been what's most visible most recently.
But I think people might be getting tired of it. I think people not just tired of, you tell me what lures to get, you tell me what stuff to buy. I think people are also tired of, they call them stoke films, but I sense that, I hear that on the ground with people of, we get it. You flew to this crazy place, you did this wild stuff, you're amazing, but there is no it's kind of all stoke. It's all, it goes back to what you said when you created your show, it was all fish grabs.
You know what it may be, and I'm not sticking up for anybody, but I think, in my day, there was no access to information.
Mm-hmm.
There was none. You wanted to learn how to fly cast, you just beat your head against something until you. Today, there's so much information.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the challenge is to be able to present and offer this information in a way that doesn't make you seem to be something that you're not or you don't want to be. Because the information is running downhill. I mean, it is. And so there's a fine line there. And I think that there is a certain amount of responsibility in today's world for people who are, and what comes to mind as the best example, and I hope he doesn't mind that I'm saying this because I'm doing it with tremendous love and respect, but C.A. Richardson provides so much information on his shows, his podcasts, his personal appearances, that he is, I feel, identified as this person who provides tremendous information about products and technique. And he does it better than anybody I've ever seen. And he does it graciously and without self-aggrandizement. I think he's the master of that. And I think everybody else falls in somewhere. But I think he sets the bar when it comes to that. When it comes to doing it without patting himself on the back or turning himself into a hero. In his shows, he steps out of the way lyrically and lets his guests be the guys. I admire him for that, and I think other people could benefit from imitating him in some ways. But the fine line that I see is that it's almost incumbent on everybody in the entertainment world today to provide information. People want it. People want to go to YouTube and find out how to, I mean, the most inconsequential problem that you could possibly have has a solution on YouTube with a video, just in case you can't understand
5 or 6 videos.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's I mean, the television outdoor hosts, I think, have requirements today that we didn't have back in the old days.
I'm curious because you're talking about, even when you're talking about the time that you lived in where all these things are coming together, and then I'm hearing you talk about the education and the information piece of today. And I was interviewing, I know a friend of yours, Oliver White, and he told me about a book called Flow. And I read the book, and there was something really interesting that stood out to me in the book. I'm not sure if you've particularly read that one.
Yeah.
But he talks about how a tribe, the elders of a tribe, decided we would only stay in a certain area so long, and then we would force everybody to move again. And the reason was because if people lost the challenge that would come with pioneering something or going to something new or learning something, that they knew that they would lose the satisfaction. And so there's this sense too where we have so much information, but I wonder if, you know, it's time
to flow.
If it's time to move the tribe, or what's left to pioneer. Because sometimes, you know, I sit down with older guests and it feels like, here's the way it was, and, you know, we're not going to be able to go back to that, which we can't. But there's also a spirit or a philosophy in the sense of how people see things that maybe can return, that I wonder, do you feel like in the outdoor world it's time to move the tribe? Because I sense that even though there's so much information, I wonder if there's less satisfaction, not just because the resource is different, but maybe because the way people go about it's different.
No, I don't think I agree with that. I don't think that in today's world you move the tribe. I think in today's world you recognize, I think the first step, this is probably greatly oversimplification, but I think you recognize that this concept that, yes, this is what it used to be, we can't go back there, these are the good old days. I think that's the most dangerous phrase I've ever heard. These are the good old days. These are the good old days. They're not. They're not. So the tribe needs to move backwards toward what the good old days were, and not accept that we can't go back. I think that that's the last nail in our coffin, is the moment that you accept that you can't go back and make things better, make things like they were, bring back those good things, good times, good conditions, situations. I think we could go back if we believed that we could, and if we were willing to endure the pain that it'll take to get there, because it would be painful. It would be painful financially, probably. It would be painful from a convenient standpoint. I mean, today everything is so convenient. It's like before we had cars. It's sort of like that. There were horses everywhere, and they were slower, and there was horse shit everywhere. And somebody said, man, we got to get rid of all this horse shit, and we got to go faster and everything, so let's have an automobile. And then now everybody's going, well, now there's all these greenhouse gases, and now there's all that, so let's get rid of them, and we got to have electric stuff. And without any regard to the fact that any more than when we switched from horses to automobiles, that there would be pollution. But now we're saying, well, let's get rid of the gas burners and let's get electric vehicles, where there's going to be even more pollution and more problems and more things, and we're just going in the wrong direction. We could go back. It would be painful. And we'd have to fight the lobbyists and the trail of dollars and the corruption and everything. We'd have to recognize it and fight it, and do with less. We could sure use less in our lives. It would be really nice.
Yeah.
But painful. I don't think that I could tell my granddaughter that and have her believe it. She doesn't want to give up anything.
Well, and I think when I was thinking about it, I was thinking more so of the moment in time, but I do think that, tied to what I was saying about the show, I do think that I really do believe that there's a growing high number of people who desire to live more simple, more slowly, more connected. Even with social media, my wife's not on social media, but social media is not social anymore. And there's two ways that goes. It's not social in the sense of, people go to social media to see tips and tricks and content and photos and maybe be inspired by recipes. There's good and bad, entertained. But there's two ways that goes. And I was talking with a group of guys that are pretty connected to this, that either people are becoming more isolated, which I think they are, of some people, but there are some people who they don't view social media for social. They still have parties and hang out with their friends and sit on porches. And I think there is hope that people will appreciate the good things from the past and move back towards it, whether that's having less things, more minimalism, being okay with going slow, because there's this, I think there's a rising interest in that. And I think there is hope for that.
I sure hope you're right. Because I think in many, many ways, we've lost our way and in life's direction. And then I think we've lost our way with one another as well. We don't tolerate one another very well anymore. Not sure why that is, but I certainly see that.
I think that part of it is the speed, and even with, in the fishing and hunting world, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of people who don't tolerate people they don't know. And they have a false sense of knowing them. Like I hear a phrase a lot too, oh, that guy can't even fish. They've never even fished with them. They're just, I don't know what or just this kind of desire to prove oneself and to call out the phonies. And I'm not saying that's all bad or all good, but the speed and the idea that anybody could know 2,000 people, or the idea that I could know somebody who fishes 20 hours away really well that I've never fished with, and then just to spend the amount of mental energy and time to trying to speak poorly of them, or when you were a kid growing up, you just knew who was around, maybe some people who were published in writings. But I do think some of that's the speed. And I know I like the way, I know when Andy and Nikki interviewed you, they said that you were described as going through, I think by Rob, going through life polling. And maybe a beautiful picture or metaphor is maybe the outdoor community can stop moving at an outboard speed, metaphorically speaking, and go back to polling and, slow things down. Is that when you think about the way back, and this can be the last thing we talk about, but the fun thing with the tribe is the elders were the one that moved it or gave it the direction. I think that there's a lot of people that care about what you think in the outdoor. Out of 135 episodes that I've recorded, the one that I did with you is the most listened to. So people are interested. So the elders, the older generation that went before, have the voice. What does it look like to move it back?
Well, maybe it'll turn out that the internet and social media will be the road back, because properly used, I think it could get us to know one another better. I just hope that it doesn't go the way of television, where sponsorship becomes everything. Mm-hmm. I think that this whole concept of the ease in which you can, on the internet, determine how many people are there, how many people you're talking to. I think it goes even deeper than that. I think you can even track the demographics of who those people are. So it gives you, excuse me. Yeah, I think if you know who you're talking to, mm-hmm. you're liable to say things that you wouldn't otherwise say, which could wind up having a tremendous amount of power and meaning. It's going to be interesting to see where all of it goes, mm-hmm. but it's definitely in a state of flux, I think, right now. And I think that there are all these different groups that are going in different directions, maybe trying to find the same thing, but seeing different horizons. I don't know how it's going to all work out. It's going to be very interesting. And I think that somehow the answer lies in the ability for us to communicate. And, I mean, today, I think that almost exclusively means the internet and social media. At this point in time in this country, I think TV is, at this point, strictly entertainment. Mm-hmm. And I think responsible for a lot of the problems that we have in America today. I mean, you look at the junk that's on there and the horrible stuff that's on television that kids are watching from birth. It has got to affect values. Mm-hmm. It has to. I don't think the internet is reached that point by a long shot. I think television today, it's still very powerful, but the content, I mean, it's not Ozzie and Harriet anymore. Mm-hmm. It's horrible stuff, horrible subjects. Mm-hmm. It's got to affect parenting. Mm-hmm. I think it's as basic as that. And values are so much different today. You know, I feel this all the time when I see young people in general. They're smarter than we were. I mean, they're smarter, they're stronger, they're bigger, they're better than we were. But they've have a totally different sense of values. They don't understand the natural world at all. The things that they see have nothing to do with the natural world for the most part, unless their parents are involved in that. They have no exposure to it. We spent our days climbing trees and falling out of trees, drinking out of hoses, whacking each other with sticks and shooting each other with BB guns. I'm not saying that that's good, but it's different. Everyone I knew or everyone I know cut themselves with a knife that they had in their pocket constantly from the time that they were 7 years old. Mm-hmm. So they knew how to bleed. Mm-hmm. It frightens me that all the things that we have fought for, all the things that we have fought to preserve and hold on to, will very shortly be turned over to generations of people who have no touchstones to the natural world. Mm-hmm. They don't know that it's important to protect seagrass or pine woods or whatever the issue might be, they're unfamiliar with it.
Mm-hmm.
In my time, we were familiar with it. I'm not saying we did a good job protecting it, because we didn't. We thought it would never end.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't realize. I mean, I think we were in touch with it. We're responsible for letting it
mm-hmm.
slip to the point that it has. And we would be effective in preserving it if we were going to be here, but we're not.
Mm-hmm.
And so it falls to children who don't know it. They don't know it. They don't love it. They don't understand it. They've heard rumors that it's valuable, should be protected, and maybe, I don't know, how does it fit in?
Mm-hmm.
They don't know. So that's what frightens me more than anything today.
Yeah, it might be an oversimplification, I'm sure it is, but to some extent, there's appreciation without all the information, and then there's information without the appreciation, and maybe the hope that a contingency of both,
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
It's interesting, too, the last thing I'll say is there's a book, and it's called Amusing Ourselves to Death, and it was really prophetic about how television and entertainment would affect the world. But there's a line in it that was really good that said, to speak is to break the spell. And so the power of talking about these things and speaking to these things, and how that can break the spell that entertainment, in an unhelpful way, not that entertainment doesn't have any place in people's lives, can actually break the spell that it has over people to re-engage, hopefully, in the things that really matter, the things that we know really fill them up. I think that many people on their deathbeds aren't going to look back and say, I'm so glad that I watched 5 hours a day on average of television. They're probably going to say, remember that time we went to Costa Rica and you forgot your suitcase at the airport and you had to wear the same clothes all week and you smelled so bad, and everyone's laughing, and those are hopefully the things that will get lifted up. And thank you for using your voice. I appreciate it, and grateful for the time that you've given me and things that you've taught me, and I'm grateful.
My great pleasure. I hope we can do it again.
Hey guys, thanks again for listening to the Captains Collective. Please help us out by sharing and subscribing, and make sure to check us out at captainscollective.com.